They told me later they'd never seen him so red-faced, so lost for words that he couldn't finish a single sentence. Watching Daniel crumble in front of the board was strangely satisfying, but if you'd asked me a month earlier whether I'd ever sabotage my own boss, I would have said absolutely not. My name is Marissa Grant. I'm 34 years old, and I built my career on being calm, reasonable, and ruthlessly professional. I worked as an operations manager at a mid-sized tech consulting firm downtown. Outwardly, it was progressive, diversity statements on the website, annual bias workshops, leadership emails praising inclusion. But inside, the same men kept making the decisions. The partners were all male except for HR, whose director only entered meetings to smooth over conflict once the deals were already done. I'd been there 6 years. I knew every detail of how the place really worked. I stayed late to clean up the quarterly numbers before the board meeting. I restructured proposals that would have fallen apart without me. I helped junior associates rehearse their slides so we wouldn't look incompetent in front of investors. Daniel, my boss, called me the steady hand. He liked to tell clients about his diverse team, while interrupting me in strategy calls and taking credit for my work. He talked about supporting women in leadership, but only the kind who smiled politely while he spoke over them. And for a long time, I accepted it. I thought if I just kept my head down and delivered flawless work, they'd see my value. I should also say this before we go further. If you like these type of stories, where the quiet planners win over the loudmouths, consider subscribing to the channel. We're working to grow to 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us keep sharing these behind-the-scenes battles. Now, back to how it started. We were preparing for the quarterly board meeting, the one that determined our budgets and secured new investment. I'd spent weeks compiling the integration results and projections. Normally, I would present them myself. Instead, Daniel asked me into his office. He closed the door, smiled in that paternal way, and told me he thought I was a bit too emotional to handle the board. He said it would be better if he presented my work instead. That was the moment he decided to remind me of my place. I remember exactly how it felt sitting in Daniel's cramped office, the blinds drawn halfway, the sun hitting the dusty bookshelf behind him. He had my report in front of him, annotated in my careful handwriting. The numbers were flawless. He acted like he was doing me a favor. "Marissa," he said, tapping the report with his index finger, "this is good work, really good. But I need you to understand something about the board." He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, settling into his favorite pose of fake candor. "They can be tough, especially with someone like you." I didn't speak. I waited. I'd learned the hard way that pushing back too soon only made them feel justified. He watched me for a moment, clearly enjoying the silence. "You're brilliant with details," he went on, "but you get passionate. It can read as defensive or emotional, and that's not going to play well with the investors." I knew better than to flinch. "Emotional," I repeated carefully. He nodded solemnly, as if he were delivering a hard truth. "I'm trying to help you here. I don't want you to get flustered in front of them. It'll only hurt your standing. Let me handle the board this time. You focus on support, get everything polished behind the scenes." Support, polished, behind the scenes. The words were so patronizing, I felt like I was watching a caricature of sexism instead of living it. I forced a thin smile. "Sure, I'll make sure everything's perfect." He clapped the desk like we were old pals. "That's what I like about you, Marissa. Team player." Team player, as long as I didn't ask to speak. He dismissed me after that, humming as he scrawled his initials on my carefully prepared budget notes. I walked out without saying another word. The rest of the day, I tried to keep my face neutral as I updated the schedule for the board meeting. It felt like swallowing glass. By the afternoon, the real sting set in. Daniel didn't just remove me from presenting, he reassigned me. I got an email copied to the team listing out tasks, coordinate refreshments, ensure all printed materials ready. Check seating assignments. Assist as needed. He might as well have written, fetch the coffee and stay quiet. The worst part was how he framed it to the team. Marissa's handling the essential logistics. Let's not underestimate how important that is, he said in the prep meeting, smiling around the table. Everyone knew what it meant. I'd been demoted to secretary. I sat there taking notes like a good soldier while the others tried to avoid my eyes. A couple of the junior associates looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. And Daniel? He leaned back in his chair, joking with his favorite analyst about keeping the emotional stuff out of the room. They laughed. I forced my pen to keep moving across the page. I knew what they thought of me now. I'd worked for years to be seen as the cool-headed professional. Now he'd labeled me unstable without ever raising his voice. When the meeting ended, he caught up with me by the coffee machine. Listen, he said quietly, voice dripping with concern. Don't take it personally. This is about the board, not you. I said nothing. Besides, he added with that smirk he thought was charming, you're great at details. Make sure the coffee's perfect for them. First impressions matter. I watched him walk away, laughing at something one of the guys said, and in that moment I felt something shift. This wasn't just about being overlooked. This was about being humiliated, publicly, and that's when I decided I wasn't going to take it quietly. The next few days were a masterclass in humiliation disguised as professionalism. Daniel made sure to copy the entire leadership team on my revised duties for the board meeting. He used phrases like, Marissa will ensure all hospitality is flawless, and Marissa will oversee support services. Support services? The subtlety of it almost made it worse. It wasn't an outright insult you could confront. It was the careful corporate language of someone who'd spent years learning to hide his condescension behind polite smiles. When I walked into our prep meeting on Tuesday, he was leaning against the whiteboard, chatting with the team. Morning, gentlemen, he said, giving me only the barest nod before resuming his story. He was joking about how a former colleague once lost it in front of a client. Just went full meltdown, he said, grinning. We had to pull her out before she cost us the account. Can't have that energy in front of investors, you know? A couple of the guys chuckled awkwardly. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. I sat down quietly, opened my laptop, and began taking notes. During the meeting, he rattled off assignments for the men, financial projections, client strategy slides, partner Q&A. When he got to me, he didn't even look up from his notes. Marissa, logistics, coffee orders, print copies, seating plan, name tags. There was a moment of silence. No one met my eyes. I wrote it all down, word for word. He paused once, smirked, and added, Make sure the coffee's strong enough. Don't want anyone dozing off while we're winning over the board. He glanced at me then, satisfied with his little joke. I felt heat rising in my face, but forced my hand to stay steady. The meeting broke up with everyone bustling to their assignments. One of the junior analysts, Kevin, hung back and gave me an apologetic look. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded. Fine, go. You don't want to be late. He left. After they'd gone, I sat in the empty conference room staring at my screen. My inbox was worse. Daniel had sent follow-up notes. Marissa, be a doll and confirm catering. Marissa, make sure the boardroom smells nice. Maybe those little air freshener things. Marissa, please check sugar, milk options. Remember, some people are picky. Thanks, Princess. Princess? He signed off with it like a joke between friends. I read those emails 3 times. My fingers trembled on the trackpad, but I didn't reply. Not yet. The next day, he amped it up. During a team call, he said, Marissa, you've got the most important job. Keeping us all fed and caffeinated. Don't want us boys passing out, right? He laughed. A few of them joined in, others looked away. I smiled, because I knew something he didn't. He thought I was broken, humiliated, that I'd slink away and do the work quietly, but something was hardening in me instead. By Thursday, the office chatter was full of the meeting. Everyone was polishing slides, rehearsing lines. I walked through the halls with my clipboard, confirming orders, double-checking place cards. I heard them talking when they thought I wasn't listening. Daniel's got it locked down. She's better off out of the way. Honestly, she does get kind of intense. Intense, emotional. That was the narrative now. And he'd planted it so carefully they didn't even realize they were watering it for him. He was good at this. I'll give him that. He knew exactly how to make me small. And he didn't just want me out of the meeting, he wanted me diminished in front of everyone. That's what stung the most. Not just the demotion to coffee girl, the message. You don't belong here. Stay quiet. Be useful. Smile while you serve. I went home that night and sat in the dark, laptop open, my task list glowing on the screen. Coffee orders, room layout, name tags. I clicked each item one by one. Then I opened a new document and began taking notes. Not on the catering. On him, on everything he'd said, on every email, on every joke. I wasn't going to fight him in front of everyone. I wasn't going to call him out and get labeled unstable. If he wanted to see emotional, he was going to see it on my terms. I spent the next 2 days watching Daniel with the patience of a scientist studying a specimen. He had no idea. He swaggered through the halls, cracking jokes about the big day, letting everyone know he was the one who'd seal the deal with the board. He reminded me 3 times about the coffee order, as if I were likely to forget it. Every time he sent me another belittling email, I saved it. I created a folder on my personal drive, Board Prep. Inside, I archived every single message. Marissa, don't get too emotional if the caterer's out of scones, LOL. Marissa, try not to overthink the seating plan. Wouldn't want you stressed. The sarcasm was so thinly veiled it might as well have been transparent. But he was clever enough never to say anything truly explicit. That was the real trick. He wasn't sloppy. He was practiced. He understood exactly how far he could push while keeping deniability. But he'd forgotten one thing. People like him get lazy. And when they're lazy, they get sloppy in other ways. For instance, Daniel kept a notebook. Not a secure app. Not a password-protected file. A cheap, college-ruled notebook he carried everywhere. He wrote his talking points for the board in it, along with the investor objections he was worried about. Thursday night, after everyone else had left, I stayed late to finalize the catering. I walked by his office. The light was still on, but the room was empty. His notebook was on the desk. Open, I didn't steal it. I didn't even touch it. I just read it. Line after line of notes on how to spin numbers I knew were shaky. Half promises about integration timelines we couldn't meet. Rebuttals he'd rehearsed for questions I knew the investors would ask. All in his neat block lettering. And something else. A draft email to a partner complaining about me. She's brilliant, but unstable. You know how women get. I felt my pulse in my ears. I closed the door softly behind me and walked back to my desk. I opened my notes, and I started to plan. I didn't want to blow it up in a way that would make me look emotional or reckless. I needed it to be clean. Undeniable, so I began assembling my own little dossier. Screenshots of emails, copies of the princess jokes, meeting notes I'd taken with his instructions in his own words. I also started writing an anonymous email to HR, to the firm's ethics hotline, to one of our most vocal investors, the one who'd made a big show about wanting more accountability. I didn't send anything yet, but I drafted them. I made sure they were precise, unemotional, just the facts. Meanwhile, Daniel kept talking. He cornered me in the hall the next day, practically beaming. Big day tomorrow, he said. You ready with those coffee orders? I nodded. Excellent, he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I know this isn't glamorous, but it's important. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He winked. That was the moment I knew he'd never see it coming, because he thought I'd already accepted my place. He thought I was beaten, but I wasn't. I was just getting ready. Friday morning, the day of the board meeting. I woke up before dawn, the apartment still and silent. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my to-do list. Coffee service, catering check, print materials, name cards. The list Daniel had given me like an obedient child. My eyes moved to the note I'd written at the bottom in small, blocky letters. 2 coffees. I made myself breathe slowly. If I was going to do this, it had to be precise. Not angry, not sloppy, just effective. I'd spent all night refining the plan. Daniel insisted on personally approving the coffee order. He made it a point of control. Investors need to feel taken care of, he'd lectured me. That includes the damn coffee. Don't mess it up. So I didn't. I confirmed the expensive local roaster. Triple-checked the delivery. Yeah, but I also prepared my own backup. 2 matching to-go cups. Identical lids. Identical sleeves. One held the standard dark roast with cream the way he liked it. The other was decaf, not just decaf. Blended with a legal herbal supplement sold over the counter, nothing dangerous. Just enough to take the edge off. Make you a little drowsy. Slow your reaction time. I'd tested it myself the night before. Made sure the dosage was subtle, not so strong it would be obvious. Just enough to make anyone feel tired, unfocused. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted him to stumble. Meanwhile, I'd spent my evenings compiling the emails. I'd used my personal laptop. No company network, no traceable logins. I created a compressed folder with all the evidence. His princess sign-offs. The emotional justifications. The meeting notes with his assignments, highlighting the servile tasks. Screenshots of chat jokes with the other managers. I drafted the email to HR. Subject line, pattern of discriminatory behavior. I also drafted one to the investor who'd made a big deal about ethics in his last town hall speech. Subject, FW:"internal culture concerns period." I didn't want them to be rants. I kept them calm. Documented, professional. I saved them as drafts. If things went badly, I'd hit send before the meeting was even over. I even set up a timed email on a backup account that would deliver the entire folder if I didn't cancel it within 2 hours. Fail-safes on fail-safes. By 7 a.m., I was at the office. The caterers arrived. I checked every item. I laid out the pastries, the fruit platters, the stupid organic yogurt cups Daniel insisted on. I set the room, placed cards, agenda packets, investor folders. Daniel arrived at 8, buzzing with energy. "Good," he said, eyeing the spread. "Very professional." "I knew you could handle it. Try not to stress, okay?" He patted my arm like I was a child. I smiled. "Coffee?" I asked. He waved dismissively. Yeah, just make sure mine's strong. You know I get groggy if it's weak." I nodded. He was too busy rehearsing his lines in the mirror of his office to notice me quietly labeling the cups with tiny pencil dots only I could see. 1 dot for mine, 2 for his. The decaf sedative blend went in his, standard roast in mine. I sealed them carefully, wiped them down, and set them on the sideboard. When he came out, he didn't even look at me. He just grabbed the cup I offered, checked the sleeve, and took a long sip. Good. See, I knew you could handle the important stuff." He headed into the boardroom, notes in hand. I watched the door close behind him. I took my seat outside with the catering staff, clipboard in hand. Smiling. Because the meeting was about to start. And I was finally ready. I stayed just outside the boardroom doors, pretending to check the catering table while listening for cues. Through the narrow glass panel, I saw them all settle in. Partners, investors, senior leadership. Daniel at the head of the table, he was in his element. He started with his usual charm, making small talk, cracking safe jokes. The investors laughed politely. I could see him glance at his notes, flipping pages with his pen tapping a staccato beat on the polished table. He took another big gulp of coffee. 5 minutes in, I noticed the first flicker. He blinked. He cleared his throat. He lost his place in the sentence. He shook it off with a practiced grin. But it didn't get better. He tried to transition into the numbers, the same projections I'd spent weeks refining, but stumbled over them. He looked down at his notes again. Blink, blink, swallowed hard. Silence. A partner cleared his throat gently. Daniel smiled too widely. Sorry, just a bit of a long week, he said, voice cracking. He coughed, eyes watering slightly. He tried again, reading directly off the paper, but the words wouldn't stay in order. It wasn't dramatic, no fainting, no collapse. Just a slow, undeniable unraveling. His speech slurred at the edges, the sharp certainty leaking away like air from a punctured tire. I saw one investor raise an eyebrow at another. I held my clipboard tighter, my face neutral. The room shifted from polite interest to mild confusion. Finally, he stopped altogether, staring down at the page like it was written in another language. He let out a nervous laugh. Maybe Marissa can step in here, he muttered, barely audible. There it was. He turned to me at the door, beckoning me in with an unsteady wave. Marissa, help me out here. I walked in slowly, my heels clicked on the hardwood in the hush. I took the papers from his hand without a word. I laid them on the table, smoothed them carefully, then I looked at the investors. Good morning, I said evenly. Let's start with the integration results you asked about. I launched into the presentation, no dramatic voice, no big gestures, just the work, clear, precise. The way I always did it. Questions came, I answered them calmly. I didn't rush. I didn't over-explain. I treated them like equals. Slowly, the room relaxed. I could see heads nodding, pens scribbling notes, investors asking about timelines, costs, partner commitments, all the details Daniel had practiced spinning. I gave them the truth. The numbers were good enough on their own. They didn't need to be sold with lies. When I finished, there was silence for a moment. Then one of the senior partners cleared his throat. Thank you, Marissa, that was clear. A couple of the investors even tapped the table gently in approval. Polite but meaningful, I stepped back, handing the papers to the nearest partner. Daniel tried to stand but had to brace himself on the table. He attempted a weak smile. Thanks, Marissa. His voice was hoarse. He dropped back into his chair, defeated. The meeting moved on without him. I excused myself, clipboard in hand, and left the room as quietly as I'd entered. Outside, I finally let my shoulders drop. I took one deep breath and smiled, because it had worked exactly as planned. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't stormed out. He'd simply lost, all on his own, with a little help from me. He found me in the break room afterward. The meeting had ended nearly half an hour before. The investors were gone. The partners had retreated to whisper among themselves. I was pouring myself water from the big plastic cooler, my clipboard leaning against the counter. He walked in, moving stiffly. His tie was askew. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, breathing heavily. I turned and faced him calmly. Daniel, he swallowed hard. You think you're clever? He rasped. I raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry. Don't play dumb with me. He stepped closer, voice low but shaking with rage. You did something to that coffee. I didn't flinch. I gave you the coffee you asked for. He let out a bitter laugh. Bullshit. I know you did something. You humiliated me in front of the entire board, made me look like a goddamn idiot. I kept my tone steady. I think you did that all on your own. His face reddened. You think you're safe? You think they're going to forget this? I will bury you in this company. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch. He shifted, waiting. Finally, I set the cup down gently. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. Why? I met his gaze without blinking. I have every email you sent me, every princess sign-off, every joke about me being too emotional. I have your notes about lying to investors. I have drafts you forgot to delete, and I've shared them already. He went pale. I continued, voice calm and low. If anything happens to me, they'll go to HR, the partners, the investors, and not just from me, from multiple sources. It's automated. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I stepped closer. Do you understand me? He worked his jaw. Finally, he whispered, You vindictive little... I smiled. Careful, don't get too emotional. He froze. We stood there for a moment in total silence. Then I picked up my clipboard and walked out of the room, leaving him standing there, shaking with fury. The fallout wasn't immediate. The company liked to pretend things were orderly, civilized. But whispers spread quickly. Investors asked questions. Partners scheduled closed-door meetings without inviting Daniel. HR sent out a polite but unmistakable memo about respectful communication. Daniel was put on leave pending investigation. Officially, it wasn't about the board meeting meltdown. Unofficially, everyone knew it was. I didn't gloat. I kept showing up, quietly doing my work. I answered questions when partners stopped by my desk. I forwarded clean professional summaries of the meeting notes. I volunteered for follow-up calls with the investors who'd seen me present. Within a month, I was asked to step in as interim operations director. It wasn't framed as a promotion, just covering until we sort this out. I didn't argue. I accepted the role. I sat in Daniel's old chair, feet planted firmly on the ground. And I did the work. I didn't need to brag. I didn't need to announce what I'd done. Everyone understood. This wasn't about revenge for its own sake. It was about refusing to stay small. About proving I didn't have to scream to be heard. I could stay calm, focused, and utterly unstoppable.